Hello everyone and welcome to Werven's World and welcome to my trade routes guide of Endless Space 2. Now this guide has been requested a lot and I wish I could have brought it out earlier, but I have been spending so many hours just trying to figure out how it all works because it's a really obtuse system that is kind of hard to figure out. At the same time, it's also kind of a simple system, like everything is kind of clear in the broad ways, however to really dig into the details is borderline impossible. So for this guide, please excuse me if I can't give you exact values of everything, but I think I am able to explain kind of what's going on in the general sense when using trade routes. So let's get started. Before we dig into the mechanics of trade routes, first I'd like to give a shout out to YouTube user Steve Morris, because he's been testing a lot of this stuff as well and leaving comments on my videos about what he found out about trade routes. So thank you, Steve Morris. Let's first look into what we need in order to get trade routes going. So we need to have a look at the research screen first, and there is this technology here, Commercial Frameworks, which gives us two buildings. First of all, it gives us the Trade Company HQ, which cost us 1120 production. Then we have the Trade Company Subsidiary, which costs us 640 production. So these we can build in systems, and as you can see here at Bertus, I have built the Trade Company HQ, and here at Nihol I have built the Trade Company Subsidiary. Now this means that the HQ will basically every turn send some ships to Nihol and back, I guess, in order to trade between these two systems, and that gives me a certain amount of income. We can visualize this trade route by pressing space, or here going to the economy scan, and then you can see this big line here, and big lines are trade routes. Beware though, if the route is blockaded, so if there's enemies somewhere along the way, then you will not get any income unless you are the Lumeris, who really don't care about these blockades. So let's then go to a very important page of the trade companies, which is here under the economic status, and then here trade and resources. And now you can see the company I made, which is now called Deep Space Holdings, and it goes from Bertus, which has the company headquarters, to Nihol, the trading subsidiary. Now I cannot build any other company HQs normally. However, now to figure out how all these things work, I actually just deleted all my companies and then basically built new ones to figure out how the mechanics work. Normally you can only build one HQ and one subsidiary, and once this one has traded enough, then a new trading company unlocks and you can build a second HQ. Now the interesting part about subsidiaries is, let's say I have two HQs and two subsidiaries, then one HQ will draw a route to both subsidiaries and the other HQ will also draw a route to both subsidiaries. So it scales really nicely. So how is it that I know that all the HQs will draw lines to all subsidiaries? Because from this map you cannot really see that at all. It's just one big line and you don't know what goes where. Well, you can actually see that here in the economy screen. So as you can see, I have 4 headquarters, but I have 4 subsidiaries of my own and 3 external subsidiaries. So I have 7 subsidiaries. So these are my 4 HQs. And then there's this little icon here, the number of active trade routes for this company which contribute to its income. And that's 7 for all of these HQs. So all of these HQs will draw lines to all of the subsidiaries. One thing that's good to know though is that trade routes cannot use free movement, because free movement here is basically the movement between systems when there's not a line connecting them, and you can research the technology of free movement here, unlocks free movement, the warp drive. However, trade routes cannot use this. The trade routes need to have wormholes. As you can see here, at the moment I do have a trade subsidiary here, but if I go to this, it says the HQ is not able to trace a route to your subsidiary. Research autonomous materials to discover wormholes, and then they can start going there. So let's have a look at the basic income of all these things. So as you can see here, I have Bertus, which has a HQ, and then I have Nihol, which has a subsidiary. And Bertus is producing Gigalattice and Ratsang, while Nihol is not creating any luxury resources. If we go to the income of our trade route, we can see that we get Red Sang, we get Giga Lattice, but we also get some Super Spuds. But none of these are creating Super Spuds. So if we actually go to Bani here, you can see that Bani actually creates some Super Spuds, as you can see here as well. So they create at the moment 3 Super Spuds per turn, and somehow that translates into 0.5 Super Spuds of kind of economic value, which then somehow translates into us actually getting 0.2 Super Spuds per turn. But so I'm not entirely sure how those values are calculated. However, it's good to know that if your HQ or your subsidiary is next to any planets that also produce some stuff, then you draw some of that stuff into your trade route, even though they're not actually connected to the trade route itself. Now, how do we get to these values here? Well, I'm not 100% sure, but this is just stuff I got from playing around with the numbers because I couldn't find it in the XML files. But, so we have 81 dust here. Now, we have 17 and 23 dust here, so that doesn't add up to 81. However, if we then add 70% of our neighbors here, so 70% of 50 is 35 and 70% of 11 is 7.7. If we do 35 plus 7.7 plus 23 plus 17, we actually get around 82, and that kind of fits here with the 81 here. Of course, there might be some rounding somewhere. Also, if we do the same for the science, so we have 6 plus 4.3, then plus 1.82 plus 8.4, then we actually get exactly to 20-ish, 20.52 actually. So it seems to be the case that you just take the full value of your systems that have the trade route, and then you take 70% of your neighbors. All these calculations go down the drain with more complex trade routes though. As you can see here, now I have a HQ in Korana and a subsidiary in Bani, and I just can't get to my income. So here I have 131, I still only have a level 1 trade route. But if I add all these together, even without taking the 70%, I actually get, well, I get less than I need to. I get basically never to the 131 that I want to get to. The reason why I can't really seem to figure it out is I tried with a different save game. Basically, I had always my HQ here, and then I tried building my subsidiary here, here, and here. So that's either 2 systems away, 3 systems away, or 4 systems away. If we have 2 systems away, we actually have an income of 120 dust. If we have 3 systems away, we have 131 dust. So far, so good. If we have 4 systems away, we go back to 128 dust, so we actually make less here. This of course can be due to the fact that Kalim doesn't have any neighbors, and if I make a route to Bani, it already includes some money from Kalim because I get the 70% from Kalim. So let's say Kalim would actually have a lot of neighbors, then I would get 70% of those as well, and that would mean I get more income. However, this means that I'm not entirely sure whether you do get some kind of modifier from being far away or not, or whether you normally just make more money in a longer trade route because there's a lot of systems that get included in your trade route and all of them supply a little bit of extra money to your trade route. So in general, definitely it's probably good to have big trade routes because then you just make more money from the systems that you go through, but whether there's actually a number that says, hey, the subsidiary is this far away from the HQ and that's why you get a bonus, I personally don't think that's the case. The first thing that comes to mind then is, well, maybe all these differences are because the base value gets multiplied by a certain amount if you buy a subsidiary or HQ there. Like, you have to be careful where you put your building. However, that's not really the case at all, and I'll show you why. So as you can see here, now we have Bani. It has 11 and 2.6. So let us add a subsidiary there. So now it has 11 and 2.6, and if we end our turn, you'll see that it's 16 and 3.9, and that's very consistent. So as you can see, now we got plus 5 dust and plus 1.3 science. So keep that in mind while I load my other save game. Alright, here we are again. So let's take a system that has much more production. So this one, instead of 11, has 18 dust, and it has almost double the amount of science. So if we then add the subsidiary here, we just end turn again. Lots of pop-ups. And now we get 23 and 6. So in this case we got +5 dust again. And well, now it looked like we got a little bit more science, like 1.6 I think it said. But there might of course be some rounding going on. But it's very consistent. I always get +5 dust and +1 point whatever in science. So this means it doesn't really matter where you put your HQ or your subsidiaries regarding dust or science income for those systems, like they don't multiply it or whatever. You don't have to put it on your richest systems. I must admit I haven't really looked into how they multiply potentially luxury resources, but at least in dust and science that's not the case at all. Of course you do want to make sure you do place them in a good position, because as we just saw, it's very good to have neighbors that are producing stuff, because you seem to get about 70% of their economic value as well. But also when you lose your HQ, nothing happens anymore. So that HQ doesn't send out any ships. So let's say you have this thing entirely full, so I have 5 trading companies, then one HQ sends out ships to all 5 subsidiaries. However, if I lose that HQ, they don't send out ships anymore at all anywhere. If I just lose one subsidiary, that's way less of a problem. So maybe you want to keep your HQ in more defended places than that you keep your subsidiary. Also, your HQ costs about double the production that a subsidiary costs. It is even possible to get more subsidiaries. As you can see here in the research tree, there's this technology, here we go, Galactic Security Charter, and that gives us commercial encryption, which allows us to make 2 extra subsidiaries. So that basically means if you have 5 HQs, that all of them get 2 extra routes. So that could basically mean that you get 10 extra lines going out and collecting more income. So then back to whether distance makes a difference in your trade routes. You might think, well, you can invest in your trade routes. You can either increase your dust and science output or your science and luxury resource output. And this might potentially scale on how far away the system is. That's not entirely true again, although of course it is slightly true, because the further away your system is, the more income you get from passing by other systems. However, it's not like this gives a higher bonus depending on how far away the system is. This always seems to give a 20% increase on your base value. So if we take 20% of the 128, we go to 54. If we then take 20% of the 128 again and add this again, we go to 179. Then if we do again 20% of the 128, we go to 205. So basically it doesn't keep adding 20% on top of the value that you already have. It just takes 20% of the base value that you start with. Of course, the base value itself you can increase in several ways. Actually finding out how this value improves was pretty hard though. I got a little bit confused because I thought I hit the jackpot. I found this XML file called simulation descriptors trading company.xml, and I thought, yay, I'm going to learn everything about trade routes now. But that's not the case at all. The reason I got confused is it says there's a line that says trading route income efficiency empire money is multiplied in some way by 0.2, and it seems to multiply the dust improvement counts. So I thought, well, hey, this system here has 18, and that's kind of partly dependent on how many dust improvements I have. For example, xenotourism here, and interspecies cooperative, and careful sweeping. And I thought, well, all of these increase the efficiency by 0.2 each. However, that does not seem to be the case at all. There's also a line that says trading route income efficiency empire research multiplied 0.05 times average improvement count. So I thought that my science output, which is now 4.4, gets increased by 0.05 for each improvement I have. However, if I get rid of all of these, There we go. Then we actually see that it's still 18 and 4.4, and this is not due to the fact that it hasn't updated yet, because if we press end turn, then we can see that it's still 18 and 4.4. So apparently the production of a system, so both in terms of money and in production and science and all that, does not at all depend on how much we actually output. However, it does seem to rely on your population in some kind of weird way, because here is our spaceport. Basically, if I just drag some people there, so you all go into the spaceport, then they don't count as being on the planets, and immediately my stuff is reduced to 15 and 3.8. So having more population in your system improves the value of that system. Unfortunately, I have not been able to find out how it improves your system, because you might think, well, maybe it's purely dependent on how many people you have. Well, as you can see here I have 3 people and my system value is 0.4, so that would mean I get like a 0.133 per person on this planet. But here it's 35 and I actually get 18, so that means I get about 0.5 per person. Here it's 28 and I actually get 11, so that would mean I get about 0.3 per person. So it doesn't seem to be linearly related to the amount of people you have. There seem to be either some other modifiers, or maybe there's a starting value, but the starting value seems to be very low. So it does depend on population in some way, but how exactly I unfortunately can't tell you. There are some other ways to increase your trade income. As you can see here, I'm quite far into the game already. This is from my Let's Play with the Pacifist Cravers. As you can see here at the moment, I am making 27,000 from my trade route income every turn. Well, this is really helped by the fact that I have a trade agreement. So once you have the technology to build trade companies, you can start doing diplomacy with other races, and then you can make trade agreements. As you can see here, I have one with the Lumeris at the moment, as it says cancel trade agreement here. So if I look at this, then you can see here all these routes extending to the Lumeris country, and I make a lot of money from that. Unfortunately, I can't see how much money that specifically gives me, but at least it gives me a fair amount. However, this is limited. As you can see here, I have 3 external trading subsidiaries, so I can draw a line from my headquarters to 3 of their subsidiaries. But I actually also have a trade agreement with the Sophons. However, as you can see here, these are all going to the Lumeris instead. So if I here go to the Sophon Empire, you don't see any lines going there. And also, if I cancel this, here, then you'll see that my income is still the same. It's still 27,000 from my trade route income. However, if I actually cancel my Lumeris one,
I also have an empire to run and contracts to coming from you.
You will see that these lines do not go there anymore, except for this line, but that's to my own system, to Lacerda. And actually my income from my trade companies went to 13,000, so that's a huge decrease. And that makes sense, because actually the trade route went through a lot of systems here. So let's say here from this HQ all the way through all these systems here, and then from this HQ all the way there. Of course, I don't know which way the trade routes go, you can't see that, but trading with other empires can be very lucrative. But now that I had the Sophons in a trade agreement, that actually didn't work. But I'm not entirely sure whether they could actually draw their systems towards mine. I assume that they can, so I was giving them an advantage while I actually didn't get anything out of it. So take care about that. Then you can also increase your trade system value. So as you can see here, for example, at the moment, economy. So you can also see the trade values of the routes, but it doesn't really help that much versus this other, versus this screen. But so you have to zoom in a little bit more to see the economy scan. And as you can see here, there's, for example, the Kais system, which has 16 dust at the moment. What I can do is I can build this solar security operations, which gives me plus 100 star system trade value. You can research that right over here. Solar Security Operations Base. It's in the Galactic Security Charter research. So as you can see now at the moment it's 16, so it should become 32 if we increase this. And indeed it becomes close to 32, it's 33. However, this doesn't always work for me. Sometimes I suddenly get more than I thought I would. For example, here, this one started at 18 and then I built that building and suddenly I got much more. Instead of 36, I got 45. So there seems to be something going on, maybe some modifiers, but at least I checked the hero and it didn't give any modifiers. So I'm not entirely sure, but at least building those improvements will increase your system value, and that will of course greatly increase your trade value in total. There's also a wonder that you can build which is really good for this, and as you can see here it's called the Trade Clearing Bureau, which actually increases your value by 200%. Only one empire can build this, so if you're the one to get it, then you are in a good position. There is another way you can increase your trade income, and that's through the experience of your trade companies. So the more income you have, the more you will unlock new trade companies in order to make even more money, but also the more income you have, the more level each trade route will get. Now level will put a multiplier on top of your income, and I haven't been able to completely pinpoint this, but there seems to be a diminishing return formula going on. So for example, I think I calculated if you go from level 2 to level 3 that you get about a 20% increase in your base level income, while if you go from 3 to 4 you get a 13% increase. So I'm guessing it's a curve that levels out, because otherwise I guess it would be maybe too powerful, but I'm not entirely sure what the formula behind this is. But just know that passively, through getting more and more income, your trade routes will become more efficient. Then we can also increase our income through laws. If we are pacifist, we can actually instate a law. Let's get rid of this one first, called Fair Trade Bill, which gives us 40% per trading company in dust. This is a little bit weirdly worded though. So as you can see here, I at the moment have 4 trading companies. So the way it's worded here, I would expect basically 160% extra income on my dust. And at the moment I make about 11,000. However, if we instate this law, you will actually see that we get about 8,000 extra. And I'm not entirely sure how this is calculated, to be honest, because sometimes it looks that I basically get about 40%. But as you can see here, I get about 80% of the fair trade bill. So maybe I'm missing something super simple, but I'm not entirely sure how this works. This is made even more confusing by having this UI here. As you can see here now, for example, I make 1666 here and 1930 there. So if we reinstate this law, you can see that I still have 1666 and 1930 here. So actually these don't increase in their money, which is also reflected here. Basically my trade route income still stays the same, but I somehow get a certain percentage, which in this case is more than 80% more in my trade systems. And yeah, again, I'm not entirely sure how this percentage is calculated. So it seems that the trade value of a system, so if we here go to the economy scan, seems to improve mostly by using either more population, building an HQ or a subsidiary in it, then also having the buildings in it that increase the trade system value, as well as having laws. Then of course, as I said before, it's good for your value of your entire trade route to have good neighbors, because you will be extracting stuff from the neighbors and you will also be extracting stuff from the systems that you go through in your route. However, money is not the only reason why you want to have a trade route. Actually, if you click on planets, you can hover over their production and food, and you can see that this one gets a +7 from passing trade routes, and also +7 production from passing trade routes. This one here gets +4.1 and +4.1. I'm not entirely sure where this 4.1 comes from, because it doesn't come from the actual food and production values, because they are different per planet, yet the passing trade route bonus is the same in both cases. As you can see, +7 and +7. And here also we have +8.3 and +8.3. But it's not only the places the trade route passes through, it's actually also the neighbors again. So as you can see here, Calum is a neighbor, and if we click on Calum, we can see that we get this plus 2.2 from passing trade routes, and again plus 2.2. So it's possible that the bonus is less for neighbors, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure how it's calculated, but at least if you have an extensive trade route, you will actually get bonuses to your food as well as production, which is really nice. The nice thing is this bonus actually scales. So as you can see, I now build extra trade routes. I build a HQ here and a subsidiary here. So that means this HQ will go here, and this HQ will go here and here. And this one used to have a trade route value of 7 extra food and production, but now it actually gets plus 22.6. So suddenly it got increased quite a bit. Again, I am not entirely sure how this scales. Like, does it scale because this one is now both passed through by this one and passed through by this one, but it's also a neighbor of this one and a neighbor of that one? Does it matter that these are neighbors as well as passing through, or does it only count once? I have no idea, but at least the more trade routes pass through systems, the more bonus you will actually be getting. Now there's one last thing I would like to mention. It doesn't seem that heroes actually have an effect on the economic value of your system. However, if you happen to have Lumeris heroes, of course if you play Lumeris that's fairly easy to get, but if you get them through other means, you can have a look at this skill here, which increases your star system trade value on systems if your hero is in the Senate. So if I go to my politics here, you can see that this one is on the Senate. So all my systems get plus 50% extra trade value, which is actually quite a huge bonus. I think that's all I have to say about trade routes. So yeah, as you can see, I've done quite some digging into the systems in order to figure this stuff out, but also I haven't been able to find out everything. So I did look through the XML files, but I couldn't really find specific values. So some of them I managed to calculate, but not all of them. So if you happen to have more information, then please let me know. I'll put it in the description here. If there is a lot of stuff I missed, maybe at some point I can revisit this video and make another one. But yeah, I really hope that this helped you in your play. So it's very important to know that actually your output of your systems doesn't at all matter for your trade route value. It really seems more to be something to do with population and other things than it has to do with actual production or food output or stuff like that. But yeah, so I hope this video was useful, and see you next time.